Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between podcast. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and medium, and here we explore life, death, consciousness, and what it all means. Dr. Luke Sniewski is a New Zealand well-being coach and somatic therapist. He's a certified practitioner, mentor, and facilitator of compassionate inquiry, a therapeutic approach developed by renowned Gabor Mate, aimed at helping people unearth the root causes of their suffering and self-destructive cycles. The core of what he does is reconnecting clients with their bodies so that they learn how to listen and care for them. Luke argues that authentic change begins with silence, stillness, and the courage to look inward. We might not like what we find there, but getting into our bodies is where the real work is done. Through this awareness, we are able to liberate ourselves from old patterns and core beliefs. His new book, Soma-Wise, is out now. Welcome, Luke.
Thank you for having me, Amy. It's an absolute pleasure.
Could really, really use your help. If you haven't had a chance yet to listen to my season 5 opener, go back and listen to that. But in the event that you don't, I need your support. If you've been listening to me for a while, or even if you just started, you can go to Patreon and put in Dr. Amy Robbins. And there you can find different levels in which you can support the podcast financially. At this point, I have no ads. I have no sponsors. I am solely self-funding this podcast, and it would really, really help me out if you've gotten something out of this podcast. If you could donate $5, $10, or even $20 a month just to help me out, to help support the podcast. I'm continuing to work to try to get sponsors, to try to get advertisers, but until that happens, I need your help. And there are other ways to support the podcast. In addition to Patreon, you can like the podcast, you can subscribe to the podcast, you can rate and review the podcast. I always love reading your reviews. They're really heartwarming to me, and it's the emotional currency that I get from providing you with this resource. So please take a moment to just help me out here. You can also find the links in this episode, in the episode notes, as well as on my website at dramyrobbins.com. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Dr. Amy Robbins. All the way from New Zealand. It's Friday in Chicago. It's Saturday in New Zealand. And you're telling me we're going to survive the day.
Yes, everyone can rest easy knowing there's a tomorrow.
Right. So let's get started. I have so many questions for you. How does this work? Like you talk about the importance of getting into your bodies, and that healing your body is where the real work is done. And I'm curious, as a psychologist, how the mind fits in with all of this, like sort of a which comes first, the chicken or the egg question.
It really depends on, again, which theory you're following. But at the end of the day, you might also want to track your own experience, because one of the sort of arguments or central tenets for connecting to the body when it comes to something like healing is that you're actually connecting to what is real, palpable, and directly alive for you, rather than some external source or authority. So when it comes to even healthy living, like it's easy to say, in fact, every single nutritional philosophy, whether it's keto, whether it's vegan, whether it's paleo, whether it's Mediterranean, they're all going to have credentials, they're all going to have studies, they're all going to have testimonials, they're all going to have celebrities that are touting, and media headlines that are touting their superiority and their health benefits. At the end of the day, however, no single diet works for everyone. So how do you know if you're reading and seeing all these external sources telling you this is the answer, this is the answer, this is the answer, this is the answer? And if you go to different professionals, you're going to get subtly different versions as to this is the answer, this is the answer, this is the answer. How do you know it actually works for you? And this is where connecting to the body can be quite powerful, because it teaches us how to listen to the body's different physiological responses that are objectively true. Like we can't argue with the body's response to something. We can argue with someone's opinion about what's happening. So if you eat food and you feel sick or you vomit or you feel bloating, gas, indigestion, or some other symptom or low energy, then something might tell you, okay, something is happening that I should be curious about because my body's having a response to this. And if we listen to the body rather than being stuck in the mind, we can begin to really decipher what our unique physiology needs for health and healing.
I can tell you what I shouldn't have done was had 2 martinis last night at dinner.
But here's the better question, and this is how we can take that question or take that observation and really turn it into wisdom. What did you notice in your body that led you to that conclusion? What is the evidence that the body gave you that let you know that, you know what, 2 martinis actually doesn't serve my body? So go, tell me.
Well, I did not sleep well.
There it is.
I had a hard
Perfect.
time falling asleep. I
There it
woke
is,
up with
another one.
pain in my, and acid in my, could have also been, food that I don't normally eat because I don't normally eat like that. Pain and acid in my stomach. I feel really tired today. Like I could take a nap.
Yes. Again,
So
so what you're doing is magical. Like this is the important part of whether we choose a lifestyle that is supposedly supposed to be health promoting or one that we might already know that won't be supporting our health and well-being. For us to use this as a scientific experiment, essentially, every time we're engaging with different choices, we can use our body as a barometer for, oh, there's more evidence that lets me know that this food or alcohol isn't actually serving my body, rather than just chalking it up as, oh, I feel like shit. But when we're able to articulate and say those things like low energy, hard falling asleep, hard staying asleep. And I love that you added, there's acid that comes up and then tired the next day. When we just objectively list and we begin to pay attention and hear the body's wisdom, it's going to be easier for us to know and discern, well, actually, do I really want to keep feeling this way and have all these things happen every time I have just 2 martinis? Or do I want to move away from them and choose something different? So then at least then at that point, it becomes a choice, a conscious choice, knowing what the expected consequences might be. The more interesting thing that actually happens is if we do this over the long term, we can actually then get curious about really unique and nuanced subtleties of our lifestyle choices. So let's say you ate a certain thing and then you had a poor reaction and then you took a break or whatever, and then you ate that same thing, but at a different location, or you cooked it at home and then you had a very different reaction. And then you might get curious. I wonder what the commonalities are between this. Maybe there's something in the ingredients. Maybe there's something in the preparation process. Maybe there's something that I'm not considering. Again, what I'm talking about may not be accessible at first, but the longer you spend connected to your body, or the more practice you have, the deeper you go. All of a sudden, all these little subtle details become the primary focus, because you know generally what your body needs, and all of a sudden you can start investigating the very minutia of it.
Right. I think the challenge, as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, and then suddenly I'm cooking every night for dinner, right? Because you notice these things.
Yes.
My question is, okay, so with the body in terms of like food and things like that, sure, it might be, maybe not for some people, but for some people it might be easier to like break that down, right? Like I had a martini and this is what happened. Yes. Let's talk about the mind and how just kind of the basics of everyday life. I have this conversation with someone often who, when we talk about stress and cortisol levels being higher, and it's like, well, you should be doing more of this or that. And it's like, okay, yes. And I do. I'm talking about me personally, right? That I meditate and I have a hot blanket and I like try to do cold showers when I can, all the things that many people hear about. But for a lot of people, that's not accessible. For a lot of people, life is stressful. My life is stressful. And I think I do a lot of things to manage within that. So what do you
Yes.
say to people who just getting up in the morning and they got to go to
Yeah.
work and they got to, which I do too, but they've got like a
Yeah.
9 to 5 factory
Yeah.
job that they
Yeah.
can't, and all of those factors that like really make life
Yeah. So
very
let me
complicated.
yeah, I think there's a lot of this seems like there's a couple directions we can take this answer. I'm going to take it in this direction, and if you want to take it in any other direction, we can add on to it after that. When we talk about the role of stress and being and the role of the mind in that process, let's imagine like someone that comes to a practitioner with anxiety. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the questions, and if we're focused on the body rather than the, let's say we're focused on the mind. So we might ask the person, okay, so tell me all the things you're anxious about. And if you tell an anxious person, if you ask them what they're anxious about, they're going to have a long list of things to be anxious about because the experience of anxiety is in the body. The thoughts that come up afterwards as a result of this anxiety, this stress in the body, the mind is doing its best job to find a reason why this anxiety is here so I can go solve it, right? So here's the mind doing its job, which is reacting. So the mind is reacting to a somatic state. If we focus on the body first and someone comes to us and they're saying they're experiencing anxiety, we might say, okay, well, how many cups of coffee do you drink? About 8 a day. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So
Mm-hmm.
here's this constant stress of caffeine, essentially anxiety juice that you're putting in your body, and you're wondering why there's anxiety present in your life or your things that you're perceiving anxiety. If we focus only on the mind and on the solutions given from the mind, we're not actually going to the source, which is the body. The body is stressed. The body is distressed. The body has the physiological reactivity that's causing the mind to go. So it's a mirror. So if the body is distressed, the mind is distressed. And let me give you an example. If someone goes and gets a massage, their mind doesn't do anything in the massage. They just lay there and they have someone else physically remove tension and stress from their body. Let
Mm-hmm.
me ask you this, Amy. Have you ever gotten a massage?
Mm-hmm.
How does your mind feel? What is the experience of your mind after the massage?
I mean, I'm like spaghetti.
Yes, but your mind, that's your body. What's your mind like?
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti. Is that synonymous with calm?
Mush, like just like
Mush.
total mush, like just
Yes,
like
yeah.
totally blissed out, like
There it is. Blissed out,
peaceful.
mush, peaceful, calm.
Right.
Your mind didn't do anything. You actually didn't go and solve anything you didn't solve any of your anxieties, and yet the mind stopped experiencing that constant outward of what am I anxious about? How do I solve this? What am I anxious about? And that's because we went to the source and we literally just manipulated the tissue of the body to get rid of tension and stress. So this is my invitation for anyone that is because this is going to be an interesting segue, one that you may not expect, that even though we're doing meditation, even though we're doing the choices that our mind comes up with, oh, I'm feeling stressed, I know I just need to go do that. Oh, I'm feeling stressed, I need to go do that. What's more important than the activity or the practice that we choose, whether it's exercise, whether it's running, whether it's swimming, whether it's dancing, whether it's meditation, breathwork, you said cold exposure, sauna, the magic ingredient that turns those practices into something that's transformational and healing is the quality of stillness. So rather than it being another check the box item, right? So, okay, I'm going to go do that. I know I'm going to feel better. But what we're doing is we're ingraining the same reactivity of my mind and thought says to do something, and I go do it. And that's how I solve it. For some people, it's healthy and health promoting, like meditation and yoga. For others, those automatic thoughts are not health promoting.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol, cigarettes, porn, um, shopping, whatever it may be, right? So
Gambling.
gambling, exactly.
Right.
You're starting to understand this. For everyone, we all have our own unique self-soothing patterns that the mind comes up with that says, this is how I'm going to get rid of this internal discomfort, right? Some of these automatic habits are shunned by society, like porn, like gambling, whatever it may be. Some of these automatic self-soothing patterns are celebrated by society, wealth, success, power, those sorts of things. If we want to go to the source, however, we have to use these practices and infuse the quality of stillness. And what I mean by stillness is that Here comes meditation. When we're completely still, we focus on our breath and our body, and we trust, and we just watch our body go through this automatic process. The mind's going to start going crazy. Most beginning meditators will say, I can't meditate because my mind is busy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, no, you're doing it perfectly. You're just
Mm-hmm.
realizing how busy your mind always is
Mm-hmm.
because you've stopped to pay attention. Because
Mm-hmm.
in everyday life, when you're not thinking about it, that's the way your mind always is. So when we stop and become still and, oh, my mind is so crazy. No, it's always crazy. And all we have to do is just keep coming back to the body, because the mind wants to react, because that's what it's doing. It's reacting, 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 reacting. And by becoming still, we're doing the opposite. So we're saying we're not going to react. We're going to notice that little sensation in our body that makes me want to move, and we're going to not do anything about it. We're going to notice the chaotic thoughts in our mind. We're not going to follow the roller coaster. We're going to just notice that, oh, there's my mind goes again, and we'll come back to our breath. Because as soon as we come back to our breath, we breathe in the present moment, and it's our body that's doing the breathing. That's what makes the breath a magical sort of anchor for us. Why everyone, mental health professionals, talk about the importance of breathing. Because again, breathing keeps us present, and the body is doing the breathing. And this is where we want to keep our attention, so we're not floating around in the imaginary and chaotic world of thought. And this third aspect of stillness, there's this third aspect of stillness, this internal posture, right? So we can either be still and like sort of gripping our hands and like really fighting this experience, or we can soften into it. And one example is the ice bath. Here comes the shower. Oh yeah, I can do it. I can do it. Just 30 more seconds, just this other mental game of 30 more seconds. Or we can say, let's explore the cold. Let's see if I could be very present and still as my body experiences this cold. And again, that way of relating to our body allows it to heal. And the reason I say that is the mind doesn't get to guide the process of healing. The body does. So let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
So talk therapy happens, and we get an insight, and the light bulb turns on. Holy shit, I get it. It happened because of this and this and this. It may not be entirely true, but it may be true that it really did source from that original insight or whatever it may be. Let me ask you this. You see clients, I see clients. After the intellectual insight, is the healing done? Is everyone say, oh, cool, done. There, it's all finished. They have nothing else to worry about.
No.
No, it's never that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because the intellectual insight and the mental approach towards healing is like turning on the light in a really dark room. The light turns on, which is a great experience. And then you look around the room and you're like, holy shit, there's still a big mess here to clean up. The mess doesn't clean itself up automatically. And that's the inner work. That's the work of the body. So the mind heals and moves at a direction like all over. It can, in a single moment, you can change your mind. And then that next moment, you'll change your mind again. And you've had that experience. I've had that experience. Many have had that experience. The body, however, is this slow, constant, and gentle movement and intention towards healing and thriving. The body has no other intention. It is just automatically driven, intrinsically driven towards healing and thriving. That's its programming. Every cell in our body, trillions of them, every single one of them has a single program, and that is survival and thriving. That's what every cell in our body is programmed to do. When the mind starts coming in, it's getting in the way of that process. Sorry, you were about to say something.
No, I was going to ask a follow-up question. So the person has insight, right? I do insight-oriented therapy.
Yes.
They have this insight. Where do you then take them with their body, with that insight? So, okay, suddenly you understand how your relationships are always going bad because the way that you internalize the divorce of your parents and their marriage and what happened. And you're like, oh, I'm recreating that pattern in my own life because I don't know happiness, because I didn't see happiness, and I don't believe I deserve happiness. And okay.
Beautiful. Great. This is a great example, because now with the insight, we have to connect the insight to the body. If we just leave it at the insight level, we're done. Like it'll just keep happening, and we'll think that our therapist is crap because they didn't make us change. That's not true. What we need to do is say, okay, well, here's the insight. Now tell me, what happens in your body when you find yourself in that pattern, because you're going to need that information, because we're going to need to know, oh, shit, here it comes. Here's that emotion. Here's that reaction. Here's that automatic thought that happens every time this cycle is about to continue. And when we start becoming aware and attuned to that physiological process, oh, here it is again. I know this experience. This feels familiar. I could either go down this path and react and recreate the same old things I've been creating since childhood, or I can infuse stillness. And this is where it's that let's come out of my mind and feel this experience, because if I don't react to it, whatever's on the other side of not reacting is new possibility, new potential, and conscious choice. Right? Because if we're not automatically reacting, we're consciously choosing. So if we don't want to be a slave to our automatic conditioning that's been embedded in our nervous system since childhood, it requires us what's required is that capacity to stop, notice, become still, and then to choose. Say, I wonder what other possibilities there are for me. And this is where practices become important. It's not that meditation gets rid of your problems. It's not that ice baths get rid of your problems. It's
not even that being in tune with your body gets rid of your problems. It's making a different choice from that place.
Yes. And those are the practices and the connection to the body that allows us to do it. So it's just the catalyst for change. We need to be connected to the body so we are aware of, in fact, let me say this. It's only in the moment that you're triggered. It's the only moment that change is actually possible. Every other change that happens is just a mental mind game. It's like, yep, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to change. Yep. But it's just, go on.
No, I was just going to say, so let's go back to the example I gave. So then you could say to someone, well, what did it feel like for you as a child when you used to watch your parents fight?
Yes.
And then they'll say, oh, I remember getting a stomach ache and sitting in the corner and feeling tightness in my throat. And then you bring it to the present, right?
Yes,
so you're constantly making this bridge for people.
Absolutely right. And we need to make that bridge for people, because this is the central tenet of compassionate inquiry, Gabor Mate's approach that I'm a facilitator and a mentor for. We need that connection, because otherwise the present moment suffering will go around in circles. Once we introduce the contextual understanding that this present day suffering is partly related to the shittiness of the present moment, but it's largely related to the same old things that have been happening to me since childhood. So if we can make that connection and that understanding, all of a sudden we can say, oh, wow, if this program has been running on repeat, then what can I give myself? What needs can I give myself? What did I need, or what do I need now that I didn't get then? Right? Because how does the child learn to deal with emotions? Avoid, repress, suppress, whatever it may be. All the little coping mechanisms that a little nervous system has to take on in order to survive an environment that's stressful. And then those same mechanisms carry forward. They externally manifest and they look different for every person. However, at the core of it is avoidance. At the core of it is repression. And at the core of it is numbing, right? So the solution means we have to turn around and face and hold and support. Like if it's a small child, if a very young child comes up to us and says, I have a tummy ache, I have tension, and I'm sad, the first thing you do is you hold that child. And then here's the magic of holding a child. Does your mind control when that child experiences relief? Is it like, okay, 30 seconds and then this child will be healed? No. Their body will. How will you know if they're having a response to your holding? What will you experience in that child's body if you're holding them?
Well, they'll relax, they'll settle.
That's it. There it is. So here we have this opportunity. Here comes a present moment trigger. Oh, there it is. I explored this in therapy. I understand where this reaction comes from. Because of that insight, the insight is important. Because of that insight, I now understand that this experience requires a very different relational dynamic with myself than the usual, I'm going to go reach for chocolate. I'm going to go reach for porn. I'm going to go reach for anger. I'm going to go reach for whatever it is that's automatic relational pattern. I'm going to go reach for yelling at this person. If you're talking about this, you were talking about the specific example of parents divorcing, and here's this relational thing happening again. We have to understand that automatic impulse for yelling at our partner is also a self-protective mechanism, because we were never taught how to hold, how to be present with, and how to process our own emotions. And so here's that opportunity, present moment. Here comes the trigger, and it's the only moment that we can change. No other moment, because here comes the trigger that sets off the automatic reaction. And in that moment, we can choose and say, no, I can be with it. Let's stay with it. I've practiced being with it, and with stillness, with whatever practice we use to practice stillness. This is what I'm preparing for. This is the real change. All that is just preparation. Here's the game, right? So here it is. And here's the thing. I can't tell you what happens after, because spoiler alert, I don't know. That's not for me to decide. Only the person that's sitting with that can then choose, okay, let's see. It's like urge surfing, right? And psychological
That's
approaches.
John Briere, who we were talking about before. That's it came out of his work.
Okay, perfect. Let's call it urge surfing. It's one way to describe it is that
I love this concept. It's so great for people.
Yeah. Well, that's because people never experience the peak of their experience and the passing of their experience. So they never have that experiential evidence that something ends. It doesn't stay shitty forever.
Can you just describe exactly what urge surfing is for people who don't know? I'm not sure if I've talked about it before, but I talk about it in my therapy a lot with people.
Yeah, so let's say there's the experience of anger, or let's start with one that most people can relate to, the experience of tiredness in the morning. There's the experience of tiredness in the morning, and that reaches a peak. And tiredness doesn't go on forever, because we have circadian rhythms, and we transition to a state of energy. However, most people are very uncomfortable with the experience of tiredness. So what do they reach for in the morning?
Coffee.
And now they don't give themselves the experience that they start conditioning that if I have low energy, I have to come out of it with coffee, because there's no other way, because this is just a horrible experience of not having energy. And yet, actually, there is a peak to that experience, and it passes away. Just like with the pain that we experience, or a trigger, or a urge to go
drink
eat or watch porn, drink. Exactly. So there's these urge and temptations and impulses and experiences in our body that they all share the same destiny. And this is a very Eastern philosophy. The same exact destiny is shared by every experience in our body, whether it's a sensation or an emotion. And that is, it's destined to arise and it's destined to pass away. It cannot, and under any circumstances, stick around forever. However, the thing that makes it seem like it'll stick around forever is the reactivity of the mind. So if we watch in stillness, this is what happens. It peaks, it passes away. It may stay for a little longer than we thought, but it passes away. If we react to it, we may drop it a little bit and it comes back. And if we keep reacting to it, we just actually keep it around by going through these reactive behaviors.
I think John used to say, you can't, this isn't maybe the exact perfect quote, but you can't beat the wave, but you can learn to surf.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're talking about, is how we ride those waves of emotion. I think that you can notice starting in your body, right? Most people don't think they're anxious before they feel something that makes them believe that what they're experiencing is anxiety.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you're also tapping into something that is, again, in the micro scale, and the tiniest of micro scales, we're practicing this way of being in meditation, or whatever it may be, called exposure. And then all of a sudden we have a real life experience where we have that trigger, or that wave, or that experience where we can ride the wave. But that's also symbolic and metaphorical for the bigger picture of life, right? Things happen to us that we don't necessarily control. We can't fight the wave, but we can learn to surf. So all of this, we can't. I think that's what you said. I think I was stealing your quote, actually. So we can't fight the wave. Like, it's impossible. And that's also, and we'll take that wave imagery. And this is why, some people want to be masters of their mind. The mastery of the mind is like this ideal or this superior quality to achieve. And through my work and my understanding and what I explore in Soma wise is that I've chosen a very different path. It might look the same on the surface, but how I'm relating to myself and my experience is very different than most. So rather than being a master of the mind, my intention is to be a humble servant of the body, that the
Mm.
body has more wisdom than my mind can ever understand. In fact, my body goes through healing that my mind simply cannot comprehend. So let me give you an example that the mind sometimes doesn't really know what it's talking about. What, give me an example. I mean, what's one bodily function that is healing, but the mind doesn't like the experience of it because it's uncomfortable? So what happens when your body gets hot? What is that called?
Well, you sweat.
And what is
Probably
it called when, what is that experience called when you're about to get sick? And what is that experience called? It starts with an F, a fever.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
am I thinking
I'm
so deep
so,
about this?
right. And let me ask you this, Amy. Does your mind like having a fever?
No, my mind doesn't.
No,
I don't like being sick.
exactly. And yet the fever is a therapeutic measure by the body. To
Right.
the body, this is healing. The body's like, no, no, this is me healing myself. Let me do my job.
Right.
But the mind's like, no, 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 I need to disrupt this and get rid of this. I might take an anti-fever. I might do this. Another example is what comes out the mouth when you're sick.
The thing I like doing least in this world.
Yeah, vomiting, right?
Yeah.
So here's the experience of vomiting. When the
Right.
body vomits spontaneously, naturally, it's healing.
Right.
The
It's
mind, the
purging.
mind,
It's purging
yes,
what it doesn't need. Right.
exactly. And the mind doesn't like that experience. When it comes out the other side, it's called diarrhea. Again, the mind doesn't like it. For the body, it's like, I need to get rid of this. This is not healthy. So we can't always trust the mind because sometimes the very discomfort that we're avoiding is the medicine. And so
Mhm.
here comes this pain, an old relational wound. Here it comes being triggered or activated by our present partner or our child or our boss or whatever it may be. And here it comes. Here comes that tension, that upset stomach you were talking about. And in that moment, we say, what did I not get when I was a kid that I can give myself now? Presence. I can give
Mhm.
myself presence. I can hold this and just be with it and breathe with it. I can give it validation. It's okay that this emotion is present. It's okay that it's here. I can hold it. We can offer it love. I love this part of myself, that inner child work. We can be present with it and stay with it and notice what happens. Can we ride the wave? Can we ride the experience to show this part of ourselves, this ingrained part of ourselves, that there is an end to the challenge, that we don't have
Mhm.
to react in our same old habitual self-protective ways, that we can be present and trust the body, not the mind. Trust that whatever I'm feeling is okay. That's the difference.
How does compassionate inquiry fit into this?
Compassionate inquiry gave me the words and gave me the intellectual connecting points. So essentially, I've been practicing somatic practices for years. I started as a personal trainer when I was like 17, 18 years old. And that just got progressively deeper in terms of my understanding of the body. And even though I started to realize that there was spiritual awakening that corresponded with the journey back into the body, like the more I connected to the body, the more spiritual I was, which was so strange
Mm.
because it started with these aesthetic, athletic, performance-driven goals because I was a football player. Eventually, just getting progressively deeper to the point that I'm like, holy crap, there's spirituality in this journey back to my body. But I never had the words and I never could bridge the gap between helping people to understand this connection. And CI gave me that language and that capacity because CI is beautiful in terms of modalities and approaches, because rather than it being like a prescribed sort of like, this is what you do, like with maybe CBT might be, where here's the prescribed protocol. CI is I thought I was client centered. I thought I knew what client centered meant until I took a very deep dive into CI, where my intention as a CI practitioner, and maybe other expressions and interpretations of it are slightly different because CI is an approach more than a specific modality. For me, I really try to remove all of my assumptions. I don't assume anything, not even that, even if I think I know what the client is feeling, the client is the expert to the point that I'm really helping them. I'm so fully in their world and so curious about their world and navigating their present and their past that all of a sudden we're exploring and unpacking every little detail of whatever it is that they came to explore on the surface. And the thing about CI is that we're in relationship with their mind because we're getting information, but we're simultaneously in relationship with the client's body. So whenever you ask a question like, so one of the common questions in CI is, well, when this happened to you as a child, who did you speak to about it then? And the answer, 99% of the time, is no one,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's information from the mind. To give you an example of what it's like to get information from the body, you would say, well, how does it feel to acknowledge that you didn't have anyone to speak to or you didn't talk to anyone at that age? And then all of a sudden they're pausing and they're connecting that realization to their body. And if their body's having a response, because through practice, I've learned that there is innate healing from urge surfing, from being present with that experience. The invitation becomes, can we be present with that experience as it's here without trying to change it, without trying to label it, just holding it and to notice. And again, that changes it. That sometimes here comes even more emotion. Sometimes it softens.
What if
I'm
they
not
can't
looking.
even, what if someone can't even identify?
Yes.
Do you take it away from them and say, what would you imagine it would feel like for someone who experienced that? If it's too painful or difficult for
Absolutely.
them to put themselves in that place.
You are speaking as if you are the creator of CI, because one of the pathways, there's, again, when people do the professional training and I have students and I teach people CI, many of them are already connected to their body. But when we do CI and when we do therapy with people outside of this world, you and I both know that many people are not connected to their body.
Mm-hmm.
And connecting to the body is not an easy process. It's not a
Right.
comfortable process, right? Because if we automatically disconnected from the body to protect ourselves because it was dangerous to feel, coming back to feeling is going to be a fucking uncomfortable experience. And
Mm-hmm.
I squeezed my F-bomb in there because it was appropriate, because it really is going to be uncomfortable to come back to our
Mm-hmm.
body. So in that case, where you have a client that cannot connect to their body, it becomes a dance. And one of those dances is, well, again, let's give you an example. So, so what was it, what happened to you at that age? Or, what the memory comes up, we explore the memory, and the client says, oh yeah, but that's no big deal. That happens to everybody. I was lucky. I know kids that had it way worse than me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hear that one
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And I'm like, okay, great. So then that's my cue for, look, what's happening in that moment is there's the acknowledgement of the memory, but there is an acknowledgement of the felt experience. And the mind, it's doing its job. So here it is. The mind's coming in and saying, no, no, no.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna rationalize, minimize, and justify away the pain. I'm not going to acknowledge that this is quite painful. And here's that pathway that you provided or that you suggested. And it is one of the many pathways within CI, which is, well, okay, let's imagine another kid that age in that situation. All of a sudden, the client starts talking about another kid in that
Mm-hmm.
situation and starts painting. And as a therapist, we're painting the picture. This is the environment of the child. This is what's going on around them. How would they feel? And all of a sudden, they're able to articulate the emotion. Not only are they able to articulate the emotion, guess what else happens? They start feeling the emotion. They're like, this is so weird to have this experience. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do with CI is get past the defense of the mind so
Mm-hmm.
the client can touch their actual experience because it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that may not work, but we don't lose the intention of remembering and noticing that something is always happening in the body. Even if the client is unconscious to it, here's some cues that something's happening in the body. The client looks away. The client looks away. The client looks down. The client shifts. The client adjusts. The client's skin changes, might turn a little red, it might turn a little white. The
Splotchy.
client's,
I see
yes,
people get real
yes,
splotchy. Yeah.
yes. The client's breathing might change. So here's where Like this is the central tenet to Soma wise. The mind tells stories, the body speaks the truth. So the client says, "Oh yeah, but that happens to everybody." While their body's dancing around and they're looking up and they might start sweating. And I'm like, okay. And I still slow them down. What do you notice in your body? Can we stay present? What do you notice a sensation there? So even in the defense, something must be happening in the body. So this is why CI has taught me to be incredibly attuned to even the subtlest and most micro adaptations in the client's body, because it's their body that's actually telling me what's happening for them internally. And so if we're paying attention to that, we kind of know when to mirror, when to pause and say, hey, oh, look, there's something there. What was that? Can you see if we can pay attention to that? And it doesn't necessarily, it's not like here's the trick and it's done. It's just little opportunities for giving the body a chance to process whatever it is, rather than subconsciously jump over it and move on. And what we're doing here is we're reinforcing that connection to self. We're reinforcing, and in the presence of this therapeutic relation, we're reinforcing that constant coming back to, while at the same time also reinforcing the capacity to not do anything. Stillness, right? Here, I don't ever have to say we're practicing stillness with my therapy clients. All I have to say is, can we see what happens if we stay with that? And let's see if it changes, right? This objective question. And all of a sudden the client is automatically doing that because they have someone there I'm not reacting. I'm completely okay. They're in pain because I've sat with my own pain and I know there's benefit to sitting with pain. So that is the foundation, that they almost feel safer because I'm not having a reaction like, oh, do you need anything? Can I get you anything? Are you sure this is okay? If I have that reaction, they're going to receive the subconscious message that it's not okay to feel this.
And then perhaps they need to take care of you because you can't tolerate the feelings, right? This is what.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. However, if we're objectively present and we say something like, are you okay that the pain is here with us? Do you need anything right now? If it gets too much, please let me know. But otherwise, I'm happy to be in this space with you as your body has this experience. All of a sudden, they're like, this is different. And it could make them curious. It could help them turn in. It could help them become still so their body can do the work that it's been wanting to do since they're children. The body wants to move through these processes of healing. The body wants to process these emotions. What gets in the way is...
It's interesting that, because I was talking to my sister-in-law, who's also a therapist. So we have some really deep discussions. And she was talking about her daughter and how she had broken her daughter's 6, and she had broken some bad news to her daughter about her best friend moving. And she said her daughter like screamed and cried for like 3 minutes. And my sister-in-law, who's an incredible mother, just sat with her. And like 3 minutes later, she was like, okay, and just like moved on. Right. And so I think this is what you're talking about that so many people don't get, is that oftentimes parents or anybody, partners, own discomfort with someone else's emotional pain results in them doing something more than just being present with it and allowing for her, same thing, right? She just rode that wave of anger and sadness. But because she's 6 and she's not going to fully rationalize her way out of it and say, oh, well, I shouldn't feel bad. Or her mom didn't jump in and say, it's okay, you're going to see her all the time, or we're going to make it okay, or whatever. She just felt the feeling, it moved and went on its merry way. And I think that's such a beautiful illustration of how, when we can tolerate it and when other people can tolerate it.
Yes. You're not only are you providing a perfect example, but you're also linking to your previous example around how do these patterns that we learn in childhood get expressed as adults? So in childhood, we learn that we're not supposed to express anger, and all of a sudden here we as adults telling our children, no, stop, you're not supposed to cry or scream or do any of that. So instead, again, once we start doing the healing work within ourselves and learning how to sit with this is when we have the capacity to give it to others. So, any parent, and I'm a parent myself, any parent that wants to improve their capacity to be with their children, guess where that process starts? Getting better at sitting with their own stuff. Right. Because that'll give them the capacity to explore new possibility rather than the same old reactive behaviors that they've ingrained in both their own, that is ingrained in their own nervous system, and that has been getting ingrained in their children's nervous system.
Mm-hmm. Well, Luke, we could talk for a really long time about a lot of topics, some of which we talked about before. But this was really, really insightful for me. I have a lot more questions I could ask, but in the name of time, because I'm going to take my son to a movie this afternoon, tell people where they can find your work and your book, and if they want to work, if they're interested in perhaps working with you. I'm assuming because you're in New Zealand, you probably do some Zoom work as well.
Yeah, most of the New Zealand is a very small country. Most of the work that I do is through Zoom. I teach and lead retreats. Even again, the journey back into the body sometimes involves unique modalities, and one of those modalities that's emerging all over the world is plant medicine and psychedelics. And there's I co-facilitate psychedelic retreats, one in Bolivia. And then related to my SomaWise book, SomaWise, there's an online program that is connected to. So the book is a companion read and guide with the program. So you'd be reading the book and taking all the theories or taking all the concepts and actually applying them to your own life and your own body over the course of 14 or 12 weeks. And then so again, it becomes an experiential journey. So it takes the teachings and turns it into practical wisdom for the person. And all of that is available at my website, lukesniewski.com.
Okay. And that will be available in the show notes as well for everybody. So Luke, thank you. Thank you for getting up with me this morning. Congratulations. Luke got civilly married yesterday. So
I did. Thank you.
He's sharing his morning with me. I'm so honored. But thank you. This was really, really wonderful and helpful. And I think helps people really see the nuances in this work and how they can begin. I mean, it's not like you just wake up one day and you meditate and suddenly everything's better. It's a process of engagement in really looking into yourself and knowing yourself and increasing your own conscious awareness of what your experiences are.
That's a lovely way to put it. And that's a beautiful summary of everything we've explored today. So thank you, Amy, for having me.
Thank you. Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.